Today is the 9th of February. So tilapia do really well in pretty warm water. But once that water gets up over a certain point, their function starts to decline. Interestingly enough, people do farm these. And a friend of mine was farming tilapia in outdoor ponds in Ohio. Now, you think you can keep tilapia over the winter in an outdoor pond in Ohio? No. The way it works is they buy fingerlings, they put them in the ponds, they raise them to size, they put on weight pretty fast, they come up to growable size pretty fast, and then you harvest every single last fish in the fall. Take them all out. And they all get sold off, and then in the spring you start with a new crop. Now, you can do it in tanks inside a greenhouse in Ohio and keep the water warm. But in terms of outdoor ponds, they can't survive. I mean, obviously. Well, a friend of mine who was doing, I don't think it was his first year doing tilapia. No, it hadn't been, because he knew when his normal harvest window was, which was like late September. Usually they cleared out the ponds. And for some reason, I don't know what was going on, they thought they could push it a little bit and get another week's growth. And then they got a really severe cold snap, and about half his fish died. So about half of that year's profits were belly up in the pond, which was a little rough. So I don't think they ever tried to push the harvest window again. Now, interestingly enough, is this just about water temperature? No. We got lots of dead fish to talk about. It's very sad. And for many years, he has kept a saltwater tank. What do you know about saltwater tanks, saltwater fish? They only can live in saltwater, absolutely. These are fish that are native to the oceans, and they're in the pet trade. And he had a saltwater tank when we met, and, you know, they're really cool. I mean, you get much prettier, more interesting fish. You can grow corals in your saltwater tank. He used to have a sea anemone. I mean, this is cool. It's like a little coral reef in there. It's amazing. It's a lot of work. Because in a saltwater tank, everything in there has to live in salt water. Oh, but what comes out of your tap? Whoops. Here's your tap. What comes out of your tap? Fresh water. So you have to adjust the water chemistry. So I love the saltwater tank. My husband buys these 50-gallon buckets that are called Instant Ocean, and it's this like finely powdered salt mix, and then he's got a 100-gallon bucket that he sits in the middle of the living room, and he's created a system with little tiny motors and chunks of PVC pipe and bubblers, and so this 100 gallons of water sits in the middle of our living room with bubblers and things and pipes and plugs, and you have to avoid it and not trip over it and not let the dog knock it over or the child knock it over. I love the saltwater tank. And yeah, it's all his job. I have nothing to do with the fish. Nothing to do with the fish. So anyway, a couple years back, I mean, I think maybe before my daughter was born, all the fish in the saltwater tank died. Which happens. You know, that 10-cent goldfish from Street Fair will live for 5 years, some of them. Saltwater fish are a whole lot harder to keep alive. They're beautiful. They're beautiful, and including, did I mention the Nemo fish? Aw, we have a Nemo fish. So finally, before Christmas, he decided he was going to get the saltwater tank up and running again. So we went to the pet store, and we got the cheapest saltwater fish there were. These are like, you know, the $2 or $3 or $4 fish, not the $50 fish, because there are $50 saltwater fish at the fancy aquarium pet store. Beautiful. So that saltwater tank requires real fine tuning. Got it up and running. It was all good. My daughter she got to pick out the little pink fish and the Nemo fish. They were really cute. Noticing the use of the past tense there. So, it's salt water. It's a combination of water with salt in it. And like I said, he's got that stupid, delightful 100-gallon bucket in the middle of the living room with the pipes and the buzzers and the bells and the stirrers and the crap sticking out of it and the cords coming off of it. Love the saltwater tank. And he got it all adjusted, and the fish were doing fine. They were doing really well, and then the water level dropped a little bit. And Sunday afternoon, this last Sunday afternoon, he decided to add some water to the tank. And he was going to do this really fast, okay? He was going to just, I mean, he's a smart guy, and he does all the balancing, and he tests the chemistry. He's got a whole delightful chemistry set in boxes with tubes and vials and beakers and colored things that is in the living room. I love the saltwater tank. And he thought it wasn't that much water, so he could just add a little bit of fresh water, and then he would rebalance it later that night while he was watching the game. No, this was 2 weeks ago. This was 2 weeks ago because it wasn't Super Bowl Sunday. So he added some water, and then we went out to dinner. And we came back, and we walked in, and my daughter always likes to go say hi to Nemo when we get home from anywhere. And she walked in, and I heard, "Ah, Nemo's dead!"
Oh my God.
And I am not going to repeat the four-letter word that I muttered under my breath when I heard that Nemo was dead. Because, in fact, when we went over to the fish tank, because I knew that this wasn't going to go anyplace good, when we went over to the fish tank, in fact, not only was Nemo dead, but the pretty little pink fish was also on the bottom of the tank, and there was a saltwater hermit crab who was attempting to tear parts of their body off and eat it. This resulted in 30 minutes straight of sobbing. I love the saltwater tank. I love the saltwater tank. We are not putting another fish in that tank until he has the chemistry perfect, because I'm not going through the emotional drama of another dead Nemo. Do you understand me? I may or may not have said these words to my husband. But, yeah, Nemo's dead. Nemo's very, very, very dead. And like I said, 30 minutes of sobbing and then several days follow-up of, Nemo really is dead, Mama, right? Yes, Nemo really is dead. Nemo's going in the compost pile. But anyway, what happened? And my husband immediately said, I don't know what happened. Because we've had, the last time all the fish died, all the pumps went out, and the water temperature dropped because there's a heater in there because these are tropical saltwater fish, and so the water has to be warm, and the pump went off while we were away for the day, and 8 hours in cold water, and they all died. That was the last time they all died. And this time, amazingly enough, the little black and white fish was fine. It's swimming around in there. It's the only thing in there. It's like, huh? It's got a very empty tank with lots of space. Now, what's interesting, so I mentioned that the little hermit crab is just fine. There's an aquatic marine saltwater hermit crab. I'm going to draw the worst crab you've ever seen. Yeah, that's pretty terrible. There's its little shell. Okay, so the little crab is fine. It's trying to eat dead Nemo, which is making it all the worse because, you know, it's not bad enough Nemo's dead. Now the hermit crab's trying to eat Nemo. So here's the interesting thing about clownfish, the Nemo fish. Tolerance curves are not just for temperature. Do you know what salinity is? It's how much salt's in the water. It's how salty the water is. And you can have anywhere from 0 salt, and we measure it in parts per million, to, you know, I mean, I guess you could have 1,000,000 parts per million, but we're just going to put, 100 ppm. And I don't know the actual numbers for this chemistry, but it turns out, that the Nemo fish seems to have a rather narrow tolerance band. The green zone for the Nemo fish seems to be pretty narrow. If the salinity in that tank drops even a little bit, guess what happens to Nemo? Yeah. Now, I don't know how long Nemo was stressed out.
You want to show this graph?
Yeah. I mean, I want you to get the idea, so yeah, you probably should draw something here. Yes, you should, actually, because we're gonna develop on this idea. I'm guessing that Nemo's yellow and orange zones are pretty narrow too, but I can tell you one thing. I think Nemo's red zone is pretty darn big. Nemo seems to be very sensitive. Nemo is not real flexible. Nemo's pretty specialized. Nemo needs things exactly the way Nemo needs things. Nemo. Little dead Nemo. Okay, so this is our little Nemo fish and our little Nemo fish's tolerance curve. Now what's interesting to me, and I'm going to shrink this one. If that's Nemo's tolerance curve, I'm going to say that our little hermit crab's tolerance curve.
Nemo's dead.
Oh, Nemo's way dead. I'm going to say that our little hermit crab's tolerance curve seems to be much wider. The little hermit crab is tolerant of a much wider range. So, obviously the salinity, and he did figure it out later, that's what happened. He dropped the salinity too much because he should have adjusted the water before he added any water. He should never have adjusted it with fresh water. Duh. Could have saved me a week of drama. But the hermit crab's fine. It doesn't even look stressed out. It's just doing its little hermit crab thing. It has a wider zone of tolerance. It has a wider life is good zone. Remember when we talked about generalists, deer being generalists? When we start to see really broad tolerance of things, we start to think, I bet that species is a generalist. Gee, they're comfortable in a variety of settings. Gee, you're okay if the salinity drops. Gee, you're okay if the salinity rises. Nemo, unfortunately, not so much. Poor Nemo. Okay, so with that, so now what you're going to do is you're going to actually graph tolerance data for a couple of abiotic factors for a real species. Who here has gone fishing? Okay, has anybody ever fished for steelhead? Trout fishing. This is serious. This is fly fishing. In PA, they stock a lot of trout, and trout are a cold water stream species. They need cold water and high dissolved oxygen, so you can't put them in just any creek. It takes a very good quality creek to put them in. What you have here is data on how many individuals were found under different conditions. So let me ask you this. When we look back at this for tilapia, in which colored zone do you think you're going to find the most individual tilapia? Talk about it at your table. Don't yell it out. What is not completed in class is homework, and there is a graph on the back.